Let's be honest, no one picks up a manga or novel because they want to read about economics. But your world's economy is such a critical detail that gets overlooked. If your character can't afford a sword, or when a city is starving because a trade route got cut by a villain, or even when a war starts because two nations want the same patch of farmland, those little details make everything feel way more realistic. In this video, we'll cover how we can write a realistic economy for our fantasy worlds. Stick around until the end, and you'll have everything you need to get started. First, start with what people need to survive. Before you think about gold coins and trade agreements, figure out the basics. What do people in your world eat? Where does the food come from? How do they get shelter, clothing, tools, medicine? These are the foundation everything else sits on. A world where farmland is abundant and food is easy to grow produces a very different mentality than a world where arable land is scarce and most of the population is one bad harvest away from famine. Abundance creates stability, surplus, and the leisure time for culture, art, and education to develop. Scarcity creates competition, strict rationing, rigid social hierarchies built around food access, and constant tension between the people who have enough and the people who don't. The geography you've already built should inform this. A kingdom on fertile plains feeds itself. A city-state on rocky coastline depends on fishing and trade. A desert civilization clusters around oases and fights over water rights before it fights over anything else. A mountain society might rely on mining and herding, trading ore for grain because they can't grow enough of their own. These survival basics create the first economic relationships in your world. The region that grows food has something every other region needs. The region that mines iron has something every army needs. The region that controls a port controls access to everything that arrives by sea. The geography of your world has already decided who has leverage and who doesn't before money is even exchanged. Also think about labor. Who actually does the work? Is it free citizens, serfs tied to the land, slaves, guild members, or something specific to your world, like magical constructs or bound spirits? The type of labor your world runs on can shape everything. A society built on slave labor has a massive underclass with every reason to revolt, and an upper class with every reason to prevent it. A guild-based economy gives skilled workers collective bargaining power that can rival the nobility. A society where dangerous work is done by magical creatures or summoned beings raises the question of what happens to the human workers those beings replaced. Unemployment in a fantasy world creates the same kind of unrest it does in reality. Next, figure out what people use as money. Not many people realize that the type of money your world uses tells the audience a lot about how the civilization thinks. Precious metal coins are the fantasy default. Gold, silver, copper. They work because they're familiar, and they let you show wealth gaps quickly. A noble drops gold without thinking. A farmer scrapes together coppers. The material itself has value, which means the money doesn't depend on a government or institution to back it. But it also means the money is heavy, finite, and vulnerable to counterfeiting and debasement. A king who shaves his gold coins down or mixes in cheaper metals to stretch the treasury is committing a form of fraud against his own people. That's great story material for a world that includes corrupt monarchies. Barter economies have no currency at all. People trade goods directly. A blacksmith trades a plow for a season's worth of bread. A healer trades their services for firewood. This system works in small communities, but breaks down quickly when the population grows larger, which is why money was created in the first place. If you want something from someone who doesn't need what you have, you're stuck. Barter economies tend to exist in isolated villages, post-apocalyptic settings, or cultures that deliberately rejected formal currency for moral or religious reasons. Paper money or credit systems imply a level of institutional trust. Someone issued the paper. Someone promised it was worth something. If the authority that gave you the paper money collapses, then the money becomes worthless overnight. This makes paper currency a vulnerability. A kingdom built on paper money can be attacked economically by undermining trust in the currency itself. Rumors, forgery, or a rival nation flooding the market with counterfeits could devastate a country without a single soldier crossing the border. You could also build a world with magical currency, crystals that hold power, tokens blessed by a temple, soul fragments, condensed life energy. If the money itself has practical use beyond exchange, the economy behaves differently. Whatever system you choose, ask yourself, who benefits from this type of money and who gets left out? A coin-based economy favors people who can physically acquire and store metal. A paper money-based economy favors people with connections to institutions. A magical currency favors whoever controls the source of that magic. The currency itself creates winners and losers before anyone even starts trading. Also, think about whether the currency is stable. Does it hold its value, or does it fluctuate? A kingdom at war might debase its own coins to pay its soldiers, which means the coins people saved last year buy less this year. Inflation isn't exciting on its own, but the effects of it are. A retired soldier whose savings can no longer feed his family. A merchant who refuses to accept the crown's coins because they're half copper now. Or a population that starts using a foreign currency because they trust it more than their own. These are the individual consequences of a nationwide problem. After currency, think about trade. Trade is where economies become political. The moment two regions depend on each other for resources, their relationship becomes complicated. They need each other, but they also resent the dependency. They cooperate because separation would hurt both sides, but they also look for ways to gain an edge. Trade routes are strategic assets. A kingdom that controls a mountain pass between two wealthy regions can tax everything that moves through it. A port city that handles the majority of overseas trade has leverage over every inland territory that depends on imported goods. A caravan route through dangerous territory creates demand for mercenaries, guards, and way stations, which creates an entire economy of its own along the road. Trade also creates cultural exchange. Foreign merchants bring foreign customs, foreign languages, and foreign religions. Some cities in your world could welcome this. Others may resist it. A port city might develop a cosmopolitan identity where a dozen cultures coexist in the same market district. An inland city that sees foreigners as a threat might pass laws restricting where they can live, what they can sell, and who they can marry. Both are realistic responses, and which one your world chooses shapes the setting. When trade routes get disrupted, the effects ripple outward. A city that imported its grain gets cut off and faces famine. A luxury good that was common and becomes rare, which makes it valuable and makes it worth stealing. A merchant class that built its wealth on a specific route loses everything overnight if that route closes. Trade disruption is one of the most reliable engines for conflict in fiction because it hits everyone. The king loses tax revenue. The merchant loses income. The farmer loses customers. The poor lose access to goods they couldn't afford to begin with. Suddenly, everyone has a reason to care about the same problem. Think about who controls trade in your world. Is it the crown, the merchant guilds, individual noble houses, or foreign powers? Who sets tariffs? Who enforces trade agreements? Who decides which goods are legal and which are contraband? A merchant guild with a monopoly on overseas trade holds enormous informal power. They may have no army and no title, but if they refuse to sail, the kingdom starves. That kind of leverage creates characters who are technically commoners, but functionally as powerful as any lord. Smuggling and black markets show up wherever trade is restricted. If a substance is banned, someone is selling it illegally. If tariffs make imported goods too expensive, someone is sneaking them across the border. If a conquered people are forbidden from owning certain resources, an underground network forms. Black markets are useful in storytelling because they create an entire shadow economy that operates under different rules and introduces characters who exist outside legitimate power structures. Foreign economic pressure is worth considering too. A more powerful nation can dictate trade terms to a weaker one. Either you buy our goods at our prices, or we close our ports to you. A kingdom that depends on a single trading partner for something critical, whether that's food, weapons, or raw materials, is economically colonized even if it's technically independent. That dependency creates political tension because the ruling class has to balance national pride against the survival of its people. Breaking away from an unfair trade relationship might be the right move in theory, but a disaster economically. Next, think about wealth distribution. How rich is the top, and how poor is the bottom? A kingdom with a massive wealth gap feels on edge. Walled estates exist next to slums. Feasts happen while children beg outside the gate. This creates characters with specific painful memories tied to poverty. It creates factions with clear motivations, and a population that's one bad decision away from revolt. Characters born into poverty in this kind of world view the system as rigged, because in reality, it is. Characters born into wealth may genuinely not understand how the other half lives, and that ignorance becomes a character trait that shapes every interaction they have with people outside their class. A society with more equality might feel stable on the surface, but look for where the pressure still exists. Maybe wealth is distributed evenly, but access to political power isn't. Maybe everyone eats, but only certain families can own land. Maybe economic equality was achieved through strict government control that limits personal freedom. Every system has a trade-off, and the trade-off is where your story lives. Generational wealth matters too. Is wealth something that accumulates across families over centuries, creating old money dynasties that control entire industries? Or does each generation start fresh? A world where noble families have compounded wealth for 500 years feels very different from one where fortunes rise and fall within a single lifetime. Old money creates resentment of the lower classes below them and entitlement from those in the higher classes. New money creates chaos, opportunity, and people who don't fit into the established social categories. Social mobility matters too. Can a peasant become wealthy? Can a merchant buy a title? Can a soldier rise through the ranks and end up governing a city? If the answer is yes, you've got a world where ambition is possible and the established elite feel threatened by newcomers. If the answer is no, you've got a world where people are locked into the position they were born into, and the only way out is through violence, crime, or revolution. Taxation is another detail that's small on the page, but heavy in its effects. Who pays taxes and how much? Are taxes collected by the crown, by local lords, or by a separate bureaucracy? What happens when someone can't pay? A system where the local lord collects taxes and keeps a portion creates an incentive to squeeze harder. A system where an independent office handles collection might be fairer, but it also means the crown has built a bureaucracy powerful enough to become a political force on its own. And the way taxes are spent tells the public what the government actually values. A kingdom that taxes farmers to fund the military has made a statement about priorities. A kingdom that taxes trade to fund public works has made a different one. Lastly, think about what happens when the economy collapses in your world. Economic collapse is one of the most underused story catalysts in fantasy. A famine. A currency gets devalued too much. A trade war. A plague that kills the labor force. A natural disaster that destroys the harvest. A sudden discovery of a new resource that makes the old one worthless. Any of these can destabilize a kingdom faster than an invading army. When money stops working, people panic. Shops close. Hoarding starts. The wealthy protect themselves behind walls and private guards. The poor get desperate. Crime spikes. Trust between neighbors erodes because everyone is competing for the same shrinking pool of resources. The government either steps in and takes control, which costs freedom, or fails to act and loses legitimacy. Both are interesting, and both create different kinds of stories. Debt is another powerful tool. A kingdom that borrowed heavily from a neighboring nation to fund a war is in a position of dependency even after the war ends. A noble house deep in debt to a merchant guild will make political decisions that serve its creditors, not its people. An entire class of indentured laborers working off debts they'll never repay creates a system that's slavery in everything but name. If your world has magic, think about how it interacts with the economy. Magic that can create food devalues farming. Healing magic threatens a doctor's livelihood. Teleportation magic destroys the trade route economy overnight. A spell that duplicates gold would cause inflation the way counterfeiting does. You don't need to solve every implication, but you should at least know the biggest ones, because a reader who thinks about it for 5 seconds will immediately ask why the mage who can conjure bread hasn't ended world hunger. Having an answer ready, even a brief one like, the conjured food only lasts a day, or the Mages Guild restricts commercial spellcasting, keeps the world airtight. If magic is rare, it becomes luxury. If it's common, it becomes infrastructure. Either way, it changes the economy, and ignoring that change creates plot holes the audience will notice. Also, you don't need to simulate a full economy on paper. What you need is enough understanding of where the money comes from, where it goes, and what happens when it stops flowing. A useful exercise. Pick any scene in your story and ask, what's being paid for? If 2 characters sit in a tavern, who grew the grain for the ale? Who brewed it? Who built the table? Where did the wood come from? Sometimes one of those answers leads somewhere unexpected. Maybe the tavern uses smuggled alcohol because the local lord's tariffs made legal imports too expensive. Or the barkeeper owes money to a guild that's about to call in the debt, and your hero steps in to save them. The economy isn't the story, but it can create problems that enhance the story. If this video helped you, hit the like button and leave a comment below. Also, if you want to get started writing your first one-shot manga, head over to mangascript.com to download the one-shot guide. It's a page-by-page breakdown of 3 high-quality manga one-shots, and it makes it 10 times easier to write your own script. And don't forget to join our Discord community. The link is in the description. It's a great place to share your work and connect with fellow creators. Thanks for watching.